Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here with Tara Wigley. Thank you all for being here. I think we have a nice crowd gathered for Tara. So as most of you probably know, Tara Wigley is the co-author of a number of books from the Ottolenghi-sphere. Co-author with Yotam Ottolenghi of Ottolenghi Simple and Flavor, and co-author with Sami Tamimi of Falastin. And she has been with the Ottolenghi organization since 2010, when she was called upon to work directly with Yotam Ottolenghi on his columns, his wonderful cooking columns for The Guardian. So just want to welcome Tara. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. Just one little thing is I'm not a co-author on Flavor. The co-author of that is Easter Belfrage. So their names are on the cover, and I was kind of backroom girl.
Oh, okay. But your name is on this. Your name is on here somewhere, anyway.
It's on the title page, but the co-author.
Okay. Well, in my book, you're a co-author.
Thank you. I'll take it.
So, yeah. So I just wanted to. Did you do some of the writing for that book, or
Flavor, yeah. So our team is very small, and we all kind of work very much together. So all the recipes are being developed in a very sort of small test kitchen. But there's so Yotam and Easter were very much doing the creation of the recipes. And then I came in at a sort of a later stage and helped them just pull it all together and kind of tell the story of the book, because a recipe book is full of lots of recipes, but it also tells a story. And there's 3 sets of 5,000 words for each introduction. It's about process and different things. So yeah, I did the writing on that.
Wow. Okay. Somebody is saying that there's something wrong with my audio. Tara, I think you can hear me. Can other people hear me? Can a few people pipe up in the comments and let me know if my audio is okay? Sound okay to me.
You're blurry to me, but I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, Peter. Maybe. Okay. Now it's working. He says. Okay. All right. Blurry's probably good, because I'm not looking. In fact, I put like a gauzy thing over my screen just to blur it. Okay. So I'm curious. Did you write? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but there's just this passage that I really enjoyed in Flavor. It's about acidity. On the one hand, acidity is really simple. It's a squeeze of lemon, a wedge of lime. It's the vinegar and the pickles, the tang of tea. Squeeze that certainty, though, and there's a bit of fair give. Did you happen to write that?
Yeah, so I wrote the introductions to all the chapters. Okay. And in fact, the editor wanted to take out the line about the acid house party, Ottolenghi style, but we managed to keep it in.
That's good. That seems like it was worth the fight.
But, it kind of needs, these books, because Yotam and Easter, or Heleen when it came to sweet, or Ramel Scully when it came to Nobby, or Sami when it came to Palestine, along with Noor, who also works in the test kitchen. They're so focused on the micro detail of a recipe and testing it 3-4 times that sometimes when you've got 120 recipes, you actually need someone who then sort of comes in, who hasn't been involved with the absolute micro testing of recipes, who can then see what the story is that's being told, and kind of have that outsider macro view. So although we all work together on the books, we've got very different roles. So I'm not involved in the 10th testing of a recipe. My job is to kind of tell the story of the recipes.
Oh, cool. So I wanted to read that sort of part of a paragraph, because I loved it so much, and it sounds like what I feel like is your voice, and I think you're such a good writer, and I wonder, I know you come from a publishing background, but that doesn't always mean writing. I mean, so I know you worked for book publishers and you worked for an agency, right? Before.
Absolutely. No, I mean, if someone had told me that this job existed, I would have not believed it. And I remember when I was about 16 or 17, I wrote something slightly pretentious about marjoram or oregano, and I remember describing it as like the taste of mother's tears or something ridiculous. And then a friend of mine said, "You should be a food writer." And I remember so clearly at 17 saying, like, don't be dotty, like no one gets us to write about food. Like I love writing and reading and I love eating, but the thought of doing both. So no, it hadn't even crossed my mind. And then I spent 10 years working in publishing in my 20s. But that was on fiction. And then my husband and I were abroad for about 4 or 5 years. And then we had twins. So it was a kind of natural change. And then and that's when I went to cookery school for 3 months in Ireland, and then thought that I could do kind of cooking and catering around having small babies, not quite thinking about the practicalities of that. And then started working in restaurants for about 6 months in London before I looked around and realized that there was no other young mums in these kitchens for a very good reason. I remember cycling home once along Upper Street in London at about 1 a.m, and it was snowing, and I was so cold and I was so kind of hungry and tired. And I was waking up about 4 hours later with these 2-year-old twins and just thought, what am I doing? And then I went for an interview at the Noppy restaurant, the Ottolenghi restaurant that was opening at the time, and had a really lovely chat with the lady who was interviewing me called Sarit. And she was the one who said sort of, what are you trying to do? You know, you've got these 2-year-old twins, you've come from this publishing world, like, why are you trying to kind of keep up with the 19-year-old Polish guys in kitchens? Like, just chill the jets a bit. So I went home thinking, oh God, what am I doing? And then it just so happened that Yotam was looking for someone who had a kind of, who could help him out with his Guardian columns and recipes that he was doing at the time, and someone who had a kind of background in sort of words and writing, or facility certainly, and also had an interest in food and cooking, but wasn't necessarily a professional chef because the recipes are all for the home cook. And I was just that lucky person who was happened to be falling between these two stools. So it was a complete chance that he then called me and told me about this sort of dream job.
So, but then so at that point, had you like never done any professional writing before?
No, I hadn't.
Wow, that's incredible.
Actually, I don't think, because Yotam's a really strong, good writer as well. So I think when he first got me on board, it was, you know, that was 10 years ago. So, you know, he was sort of 2 books in at that stage. It was a really different chapter. So we started off very organically, just with the Guardian columns, which have a little intro, and, you know, there was no plan about books or anything at that stage. And then sort of over the years, it became clear that my real strength, if you like, sort of lies in writing about food. And I'm a completely competent cook, and very good. And I cook a lot of, you know, cook obsessively. But then when you see someone like Easter with Flavour, or Noor or Heleen, then you see actually the real kind of mad scientists, or Ramel Scully with Noppy, who are the complete geniuses, and that's where their skill lies. So Yotam's just really, he's really good at sort of picking his team, and for us all to kind of have our different role and our different, so what we bring to the party.
So maybe he just sensed that in you. He had a feeling that you were going to be wonderful at that. So what about, I'd love to hear about kind of the whole culture, you know, the whole cultural experience of what you do. Like when you co-wrote Falastin with Sami Tamimi, you went and spent a lot of time in Palestine, and what can you tell us about that?
I mean, it was incredible. We were really lucky at the Test Kitchen to not be in a rush when we're doing our book. So, you know, we're allowed to have this kind of 2 years and several trips to do this thing, which is incredible. And initially I was really nervous and excited, but nervous because I was completely out of my comfort zone. You know, I'd come from Simple and Plenty More and books that were very much in my comfort zone, and I understood the language of the recipes and the food and the culture. And you know, the situation with Palestine is so intimidating to an outsider. but then actually I thought that was a kind of strength, because then I wanted to write the book that I wanted to read as someone who wants to know more. And obviously a recipe book is such a good way in for people who are almost embarrassed by their ignorance of a culture or a region. It's such a kind of, I'll hold your hand and let's eat the food and tell the stories and show the people and show the land. So we just started out, and Sami and I came at it from such a different angle, because he had, initially he bought a lot of recipes that were very traditional Palestinian, and then we realized quite quickly that that's not really the book that we wanted to write, because it's been written already, so people can find the very traditional recipe for doing things. But we wanted a book that was really practical and useful for the home cook. I'm all about the practicalities of when it comes to recipes. And then we also realized that we wanted so much of the book to be given over to stories about people and life going on in Palestine today. And then we went there. I went there a couple of times by myself. I did a marathon around Palestine.
Wow.
Amazing. I took my husband. He thought we were doing a culinary tour, but in fact it was a marathon. In fact, we were meant to do half a marathon, and then I think I'd eaten so much tahini the day before that halfway around I realized that I was going to do it all again. And then went with Sami twice for research, and then once with our amazing photographer Jenny. So yeah, we really got to know people and the place, and it was great. It was a really sort of massive experience for Sami and I to share, and for us to be, it was for him it's just kind of journey home, and for me it was this adventure into a new cuisine, and that sort of almost moving separate ways on the kind of elevator just allowed for a really just sort of energetic 2 years.
Yeah, well, wonderful. I think that, really for me, the book, I really love the book. It's honestly one of my favorite cookbooks ever. But it's not, it's not just a recipe book. I mean, the stories are so wonderful, the stories of the people. And it really it's just a beautiful way into the culture that I think you captured so well. I mean, you and Jenny, that's Jenny Zarens.
I mean, she's incredible. She's just this beautiful person. And she, half the photos were taken at kind of 5 a.m. She'd disappear off. And I think when she goes on a trip, she just is like little Duracell bunny who doesn't stop. And then she comes back after 2 weeks and kind of collapses. But yeah, I mean, she and I again were seeing it from the kind of the outsider's eyes, which just brought a real energy. And the stories, I'm really proud of them, and because I think these recipe books can sometimes all be a bit tinged in sepia, where there's kind of, it's all talk of kind of recipes handed down from granny to daughter to aunt, and those books are so beautiful and important, but that's not the book that we were telling. We wanted very much just to give these snapshots and these windows onto life being led today, and just to open the window onto all the contradictions and paradoxes and good things and bad things and hopeful stories within hopeless situations.
Yeah, I thought you handled that really well, that sort of the idea of contradiction and how this isn't an easy subject. And, you made it like, it's not like, oh my God, like really we're going to have to like slog through this like difficult, conflicted, like you made it really, sort of relatable and smart. And I really loved it. What was most, surprising to you on those trips about the culture or what you found there?
But I think it's almost a kind of cliche about the sort of abundance of hospitality, but it is humbling for someone who, I think anyone who gives their time, I'm just so impressed and humbled by it. Because I think we sort of lost that knack of just the gift of time. Someone who's just spent half a day preparing a lunch for someone they don't know, who's sort of coming to ask them questions. So that was beautiful, but possibly not surprising. I think I was surprised by how much fun we had, because again, the story that we're told is very sobering and hopeless, and actually, you know, had real giggles in the Ida refugee camp with Islams rolling our dumplings for the shish barak, and just being really cheeky with her and the story she was telling, and her husband kind of rolling his eyes, and just how much we had in common probably surprised me. And it surprised me quite how much Sami and his family could eat. It's quite impressive when it comes to like eating sweet things. I can eat a lot of savory things, but the sweet things, yeah, you know, when you sort of, it's like when you're not drinking and then people are drinking around you, you're like, wow, you are just chucking it back. I think I was probably surprised by how much fun it was.
Yeah, very cool. I've been noticing on Sami's Facebook group, I guess, or maybe I don't know if it's a Falastin Facebook group or Sami's Facebook group. He's been making or talking about those tahini rolls.
Okay.
Oh my God, they look so good. I'm like, I'm not much of a baker, but I'm gonna
They are good. I'm not a baker either, but they are really, really fun to make. And yeah, they're a bit of a mystery because you really do apply quite a lot of sugar to the dough. But when you eat them, I think the tahini so offsets it. They're fantastic.
So
yeah.
I have to ask you something, and this is it's a question kind of that comes from Juliet Jacobson, who is my partner at Cooks Without Borders, and she's our design director and created all the beautiful, the beautiful look and feel of the site. And this came up because she texted me yesterday. Today is her husband's birthday. Happy birthday, Chris. And so I asked her what she's going to make for dinner. So I'm reading you a text that she sent me. She said, for dinner, we're making a Middle East, and I'm sorry, Julie, if this is like a breach of something. We're making a Middle Easternish dinner, a dish from an old friend of Chris's who comes from a Lebanese family. He calls it upside down, and he used to make it for all the architecture students in college. It's lamb, eggplant, question mark, cauliflower, spices, onions, and rice that you cook in a pan and then invert it when it's done. It's supposed to have a delicious crust of crispy rice. I'm guessing this rings a bell for you.
She's making maklouba. I hope she's practiced this before. This is quite an epic dish to be sort of pulling out the bag if it's the first time around. Juliet, have you made it before? I can see you're there. No, she's a newbie. Just crack open a large glass of wine and get going. Newbie but bold.
She's bold. Yeah, she's bold. She's also a great cook who doesn't like to eat. She's a great cook.
Only thing you need to be bold is for the inversion. So you just, you make it in your casserole pan or what you've got, and then absolutely you need to have boldness and conviction when it comes to the flip. But that's a bold dish. Wow, happy birthday! I'm impressed.
It's so funny because I came up with the answer right away as well because I can't remember. I think it was right after Falastin came out, and I can't remember. I think I had the idea that I wanted to make this dish, and then I saw it in Falastin. But I actually I wanted to develop my own recipe, which is a little bit insane since I'd never made it before. And so I took, I tried some elements of the one from Falastin and a couple others, and just like as a starting. But I remember that moment, like. Yeah. It's pretty scary, but yeah, you just have to go for it, and it unmolded beautifully. So we'll.
Okay, so once Juliet's made the one in Palestine, then she needs to make the one in Jerusalem, and then you can compare and contrast.
Yeah.
But Palestine is great because it's got these kind of epic recipes, which are real kind of signature dishes of Palestinian sort of cooking, but then it's got just a lot of very quick and kind of put together in like 15 minutes or kind of really easy entry point chicken dishes. So it's not all maklouba.
Yeah, I love that. I love the dish that's like there. It's cod with a cilantro-y paste on top of it.
Yeah.
But in Britain, do you call cilantro? You call it coriander, right?
Coriander, yeah.
I love talking to you the other day and hearing all about courgettes and aubergines, which are just such prettier names than what we use in the U.S. Like eggplants and zucchini. I love courgette, and perfect. But
yeah, that cod dish is beautiful. I mean, that really is ready in 15 minutes. Yeah, and then with the whole recipes, because that isn't necessarily a dish that we ate in Palestine. And again, that was a whole conversation over the course of 2 years, was sort of how much one's allowed to play around, in inverted commas, with recipes, because although it's playing around for us, it's not playing around if the extent to which food is linked with identity and history and the past in Palestine. So initially the recipes that Sami brought to the book were all very kind of traditional and old school. And then he had to go on the sort of journey of realizing that as long as our pantry stayed traditional in terms of spices and herbs, then we were allowed to kind of, quote, play around. But then things like, sometimes I would suggest that we could use quinoa instead of bulgur, for example, to make it accessible to a gluten-free audience. And Sami just absolutely drew a line and said, this is not, like, there is no quinoa in the Palestinian pantry. So it was a real kind of process.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that in a situation like, I'm thinking about one of my favorite Ottolenghi dishes that, I don't know. Were you involved in Plenty, or was that that was before?
He's the only one I wasn't involved in.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. There's like a tabbouleh in Plenty that has quinoa and peas.
Okay. And radishes.
But it's almost like Plenty's not. It's not saying this is the food of a particular culture. So.
Right.
But I don't know. I find stuff like that really interesting. Like, how do you navigate that stuff? And it's one thing for me to navigate it as, like, a person who's not from that culture writing about the food, and I have to be very, very careful and respectful of, so we try to really write about the background of the dish and the history of it, so that we can, so that we show it its proper respect. But then if you're Sami Tamimi and you're from there, don't you get like
kind of a free pass?
Yeah, in a way.
I just think like I think it's just about acknowledging the story that has preceded it, and then also throughout Palestine we have this idea of stories being recipes and this link between the two, and that they can be handed on from person to person, and in so doing some details change and some details remain the same, but hopefully the essence of the story and the recipe is the same. And I think it would be a shame if we weren't kind of allowed to things, but saying that at the same time as knowing that it's not just about food, it is about identity. And that was something that really struck me when I went to Palestine, because coming from London, I just don't have strong opinions about whether the kind of cream or the jam goes on top of a scone. I really don't care. It doesn't affect my sense of self, or I don't really care about fish and chips, or whether the peas should be mushy or not. But yeah, when you go to Palestine and you see the extent to which the olive oil season is a complete part of life in 2021, this is not a sort of sepia past, and actually the link between the picking of the olives and the season and the harvesting and the crushing of the olives to make the olive oil, and then the chicken Musakhan dish that results to showcase the olive oil. And this is a family thing. This is kind of happening now. You realize that it's such a different thing, and that actually we choose to eat seasonally, but actually it's just a part of life and identity. So we played around, but with really not ever in a kind of irreverent way.
Were you there during olive oil harvest? I mean, during the olive harvest season?
We did pick. I think I've been lots of times. I wasn't there for the big kind of the big moment. I went on a culinary tour, and we picked some olives, which showed me quite how difficult it is. But no, we weren't there. But tasting the actual olive oil from a tree, when you've met the guy who's kind of sits under and guards the tree, is incredible. And then the idea of tasting the terroir in the olive oil like you would wine. It's amazing. Palestinian olive oil is beautiful if anyone can get hold of it.
Yeah, I must have been reading. I was reading about that somewhere. I don't know. I don't know. I read so many things that I forget where it's from. But I feel that it was something Sami Tamimi was saying somewhere about the Palestinian olive oil. Did you have a chance to enjoy to eat chicken Musakhan there? It's one of my favorite dishes. Maybe
I love it, and it's really good if anyone's looking for an entry point recipe to Palestine. It's such a good one because it's it's delicious and beautiful and new if you haven't had it before, but it's totally easy. You just marinate your chicken, you sweat down your onions and mix them with the sumac, and then layer it up with flatbread, and it's a lovely dish to eat with your hands and pull. I think Sami's sister made it for us, amongst many other things. And it's just great. It's just absolutely great. And then proper sumac, that really kind of tangy, astringent spice. And I also like drizzling.
There's tons of sumac in it. I love that.
There's a lot. And cumin, yeah. And I always batch make those onions so that you can have them around for a few days, just to kind of put in other sandwiches and things.
Yeah, sort of caramelized. So we have one question from Peter Shar, who wants to know about the maklub. How do you pronounce makluba?
If Sami is here, I'd be embarrassed. Makluba.
Okay, so if I think he means is the inversion the same technique as tortilla española?
Absolutely. No, because that you put on a plate, wouldn't you? And then you slip it back in. And you don't want to be doing that here. You just want to. Because I think tortilla, you put it and then you slip it back into the pan, but this is just the once, and then the big moment is kind of taking the pot off and then just hoping that the whole thing is sort of dropped down onto your platter.
So I have a photo of the one that I made. I don't know if we can see it, but
oh wow,
it unmolded.
That's incredible. That's fantastic. When did you make that?
It was in July, so I can't remember when was Falastin published in the US? I don't know if you remember that.
I think it was July. It moved around a few times, but I think it ended up being July.
Yeah, so I remember it was around the same time. But I'll do a story about it, and of course I'll mention all both recipes. I need to actually cook both of them. So Julie says in the chat here that she has been studying the one in Jerusalem. Was there sort of the feeling that because it's in Jerusalem, it needed to be kind of different than that one? You didn't want to duplicate, or
we didn't. I mean, we didn't actually look at the one in Jerusalem. It had to be there in Palestine as one of the kind of main signature dishes. And there's a bit of crossover with Jerusalem. The cauliflower fritters, that was Sami's favourite, that his mum used to cook for him to have on the way home from school. And then the hummus is fairly unchanged.
Yeah.
And then there's reference to his mum's fatoush, the salad that uses up kind of day-old bread, and then the makluba. I mean, there's that crossover, but they're very much sort of sister books. In fact, UK editions, I love the way they sit kind of side by side on the shelf. And
oh yeah, nice.
I just think it's quite a powerful statement to have Jerusalem and Palestine sitting side by side. And they've got the same kind of feel. The UK editions, they both got this kind of cloth cover. So yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. I have a question about Fatoush and the bread, and I would love to know, like, in the region and I have to say that part of my very small household is my son's girlfriend, who's Lebanese, and her family lives in Qatar, but they're all, her father's Syrian, her mother's Lebanese, and she grew up there. And when we talk about Fatoush, it's like the bread and how the bread is supposed to be and how important is the bread, because it's basically like a bread salad, right? And you mentioned day-old bread. But
yeah.
Sometimes it's crisp, sometimes it's not. Like, is the bread in the Fatoush like a big thing? And is it kind of, do people argue about it, or like what's
I mean, my big secret is that I don't really eat bread. So my Fatoush salad is I'm going to pick the bread bits out and give them Sami. I remember going to a restaurant once in Haifa called Fatoush and asking for a Fatoush salad without the bread, and the guy looked at me like I was completely mad. It can be done in different ways with your pitta. I mean, I think you should have bread. I think pitta slightly defeats the object, because you want your bread to soak up the kind of the yogurt and the sumac and stuff. So I think it's sort of naturally day old and a bit crispy, but I think there's other, I think frying bread and having pitta is better when it comes to something like Musakhan, the chickpea kind of paste, and then you can use those kind of crisp bits to eat the chickpea. But this one really wants to soak up the juices. But for me, Fatoush salad is all about the sumac again, and the kind of the yogurty sauce. And I would not say this if Sami was here. I'm sorry if you're listening. I make it at home. I just make the salad is so delicious without the bread. But yeah.
I think if I'm remembering right, for Cooks Without Borders, I did a dish called Fatoush-ish, and I left out the bread.
Still coming out now.
Yeah, when I'm being good, I don't eat bread, but for me, like during pandemic, I'm allowed to eat all those things like bread.
Yeah, I had that in this Lent. We were thinking about things we were going to give up, and I'm completely obsessed by aubergines and have aubergines every day. So that would be the kind of obvious thing to give up, which would be difficult for me. And then I just thought, Lent 2021, like we just got to hold on to what we've got at the moment.
Yeah.
Aubergines for these 40 days.
Yeah, let's not be unreasonable. Let's see. I'm wondering if we have any other questions. Hey guys, you're all so quiet today. I know Tara is extremely interesting, but anybody have any questions? Love to open it up a little bit.
I'm interested to know if people have been to Palestine and so traveled around, because it's we'd love more people to go there and walk around and meet the people that we talk about in the book and eat in the restaurants and kind of do something other than just go to the religious sites, because a lot of people just stay in Jerusalem and just come to Palestine for their kind of one day to do all the sites, and then they're kind of shipped back to Jerusalem. And so yeah, I'm interested to know if anyone's been to Palestine.
Juliet would love to go. I would love to go too. I've never been to the Middle East. I've traveled a lot, but never been there. I think anyway, so what are you working on now? Are you working on another book? Are you allowed to say, or
the test kitchen has been very busy in the last year, so pivoting towards the different way in which people have been cooking at home. So the new books that are going to come out are going to reflect that, kind of recipes which rely a lot on kind of what you've already got in your pantry, and rather than and recipes that are a lot more sort of suggestive of alternatives you can use, and just a lot more relaxed. And then I'm going to be working on a book with Heleen, a savoury book. Heleen, who did Sweet, is doing a savoury book, which will be out in 2023. So yeah, there's just lots going on. You've got the Guardian column, we've got a column in the New York Times every month, and then these sort of book projects.
So do you write those columns? Do you still work on the columns as well? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I love the columns. They're so great. So I'm glad you brought up that kind of pantry subject, because the pantry is so important in Ottolenghi Simple and in flavor. And I love in Simple this sort of idea of like, oh, there's the Ottolenghi ingredients. Can you just talk a little bit about that, and has that, if you have the Ottolenghi ingredients in your pantry, you can make a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because we had a meeting yesterday about the new book with Heleen, and there's a lot of kind of more Asian tilting recipes because of her background, and the question of kind of how many ingredients you can ask readers to invest in. And we were saying, so long as they're used throughout a book, they're not just in one recipe. A quarter of a teaspoon of ground cardamom in one recipe is just useless to people if it sits on the shelf. But I think if you say to people, here's the deal, here's the book, you need to buy these 10 ingredients, which all have a very long shelf life. And once you've made that commitment on that investment, then, you're good to go with the book. And then, so for Simple, that worked really well. We had our 10 ingredients, which were all available in supermarkets or online. And once people had those, they were really, really kind of just given so much reign throughout the book, and you know, and it's so interesting to see the kind of Ottolenghi effect making its presence with sales of kind of black garlic or rose harissa or preserved lemons and things that we all sort of slightly think that everyone knows about, but actually they don't, and it can be really exciting. So, and I think that's what people buy into with the books, is they do kind of expect a new ingredient each time. And just, you know, so for flavor, Easter's mad about chilies, so it was all kind of Mexican dried chilies, and so yeah, it's kind of it's the balance of not wanting people to roll their eyes with the need to get new ingredients, but also wanting to kind of keep pushing people on and not write the book that's being written sort of elsewhere.
Yeah, I cracked myself up, I think, when I got flavor, because I happened to have all of the ingredients except for maybe one. I didn't have I know I didn't have rose harissa, because I've never. Okay. I need to get some rose harissa. I've never cooked with it, but I'm gonna read the 10 Ottolenghi ingredients from Simple, and just Juliet is asking about it. So sumac, za'atar, Urfa chili flakes. I have to admit, I don't have those. I use Aleppo pepper a lot. Are they very?
Yeah. Oh, because Urfa, it's really chocolatey, super mild. So it's good. Aleppo also hasn't got the heat, so that will work. And they both look, I mean, Aleppo and Urfa are sort of almost as much about the look as they are about the flavor, although the flavor's great, so that's fine. You're allowed.
Give me a pass. Ground cardamom, pomegranate molasses, rose harissa, tahini, barberries, black garlic, and preserved lemons. So is there, this might be like my only criticism of the book, of the whole book. I don't think there's a recipe for preserved lemons in the book, is there?
There's not a recipe to make. If you want to, there's a recipe in, is that Falastin, the criticism, or?
No, for Ottolenghi Simple.
Okay, yeah, no, there's not a recipe to make preserved lemons. That's saying you should go and buy your little preserved lemons. But in Jerusalem, there's a recipe.
Okay.
For there's two recipes. There's one for quick preserved lemons, you can make in this, I think 3 days, and then one for longer. But in fact, the preserved lemons we use a lot in the test kitchen. The smaller ones are a very soft skin rather than the kind of big ones that you might make yourself.
Yeah, but it's a good time to make them right now because it's citrus season and it won't be forever. So I know I just finished the batch that I had made, I guess, last year. You're probably only supposed to keep them a few months, but I keep them a really long time.
Yeah, as long as they're not covered. Sami, when it comes to preserved lemons, Sami always tells the story about when we first met in a kitchen, sort of over 10 years ago. And I'd never had a preserved lemon before. And I went to his little, we're in the basement in Musakhan Street in London. And I tried a preserved lemon and I thought it tasted like soap. I thought it was absolutely, I had like a big child reaction to it. And he just thought, who is this girl? And little did I know that now literally not one meal passes, breakfast, lunch and supper, without me having preserved lemon at some point in it. So
yeah. It's such a good ingredient. It's or even condiment. So black garlic, I must confess, I was late to the black garlic party and I had bought some, so I had it in my fridge, and then I saw that the recipe for it's a Brussels sprouts recipe and Simple, and use the black garlic for it. Oh my God, it is such a cool ingredient. What do you besides that recipe? What do you like to use it for?
That's the one most. It's great at Christmas. I mean, I like to just slice it up and put it through a risotto. It works really well. Or in Plenty More, there's a beautiful dish where you blitz it up with yogurt, and then you spoon that on roasted slices of aubergine, and then you have your herbs on top, which is really great. Then in the Noppy cookbook, there's a recipe where you blitz it up with a bit less yogurt, so it's quite intense black garlic, and then you mix that. You kind of mix all your roasted wedges of aubergine through it, and then it's just more intense. So the combination of aubergines and black garlic is wonderful.
So we have a really good question here from Josh A. Where can I get the best tahini in USA? It's a great question. I don't know, Tara, if you can answer it, but I'm sure you could tell us what to look for. If you can't answer it, I'm sure you can tell us what to look for in a good tahini.
I mean, the only shop I know is, do you have Seed and Mill or is that just New York? But it's, I mean,
we have people all over the country here in this conversation, I think. Okay. So we could have people. I don't know where Josh is. Maybe he's in New York.
For us, it's all about just Middle Eastern tahini, as opposed to, with apologies, the Greek or Cypriot tahini. And if you try the two side by side, the Greek and Cypriot tahini, which is the one that's most sold in supermarkets in the UK, is just very claggy and sort of bitter. And tahini should be good enough to kind of eat by the spoon, like a kind of runny peanut butter. Mm-hmm. It should be kind of pourable. So if it's not kind of good enough to eat by itself, or to also drizzle on toast or porridge, then just what you cook with it is going to be very different. And you know, there's a fish dish in Palestine, for example, where you have this fish kind of baked in tahini, and it's a really rich dish. It's almost like a kind of bechamel. It's very rich and heavy. And the difference between using Middle Eastern tahini, which is creamy and nutty and smooth, compared to the claggy tahini, is huge. So just a Middle Eastern shop. I mean, if you shop online, you'll be able to get it.
So the idea is try to buy one actually made in the Middle East, whether it's online or in a Middle Eastern shop where you live, or whatever, I guess.
Yeah, stick to Greek feta, but when it comes to tahini, then
I'm sorry?
I said stick to Greek feta, but not Greek tahini.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Okay, I'm looking at the poll. Only a few people have weighed in. What's your favorite Ottolenghi-sphere cookbook? We have 2 votes for Jerusalem, 1 vote for Falastin. I don't think anybody has. You guys vote in the poll.
I have it for different seasons. So when it comes to autumn, I always reach for Jerusalem, and then just last week I started reaching for Plenty More and made some kind of pea fritters. So for me, they're quite seasonal.
Yeah, I love the first Plenty for spring, because there's so many beautiful salady things and those spring herbs with all the dill and.
Yeah. I love the way all the books are so different and you know, so it's like sort of putting on a kind of theatre production. They're all just so different. They're such a different. They all tell a really different story, and yet they're all part of this same family.
We had another question about somebody who had lived in Israel, spent some time in Israel. He says, we lived in Israel for a year in 1977-78. I wonder how similar the food is. So I think we were talking about Palestinian food when he asked that question. It's an interesting question, of course, partly because Yotam Ottolenghi is from Israel, and so what are the commonalities, or how different would you say things are?
I mean, the stories that he tells about growing up in Jerusalem and the way he ate food feels quite similar to my experience of walking around today in terms of the fruit and vegetables being sold on the streets and in the markets. And you know, there's this big market called Machnayeda, which is just full of all, you know, everyone selling their spices and their nuts and their herbs, and these herbs, sort of bunches that are bigger than kind of any bunch of flowers you can imagine, and a lot of, you know, the hummus area, and everyone eating with their hands. So the atmosphere feels very kind of, the atmosphere I was experiencing felt very similar to the one that I was reading about in Jerusalem from Yotam, and what him and Sami were saying. But then there's also the whole new scene of the kind of exciting restaurants, you know, as with all cities. And my husband and I went to Jerusalem on a kind of foodie few days, and then to Tel Aviv, and we've just never ever eaten better. It was just incredible, and also the restaurants had a really quite sort of anarchic feel about them that we just don't have in London. And I think it's because everything there is so intense and and just so, yeah, everything's so intense that at the end of the day, all there is kind of food and drink and having a shot and a shot like that. And we'd be sitting in this restaurant at the bar, a restaurant called Mahnieda, which is this incredible restaurant in Jerusalem. And we started off with 2 shots of tequila, and then everyone behind the bar kind of had a shot, and it's not kind of measured, it's all poured, and then we had our starters were kind of bigger and more bountiful than most kind of main courses. It just didn't feel like everything's been kind of weighed and measured, and just insanely good food, largely because it's doused in this amazing tahini, and just quite sort of anarchic in a way that I haven't experienced in London.
It sounds very exuberant. It sounds.
Yeah.
So, wait, I had something else I wanted to ask you about the new book. So you've been sort of living in this kind of Mediterranean, Levantine flavor world for some time, and now it's going to feel a little more Asian. So can you talk about or do you know yet what direction that will take? Like what parts of Asia the flavors will be coming from, or
no, it's all at the moment. It's all in Helen's head and kitchen. So she's been working on it for the last 6 months in her own kitchen, kind of in lockdown. And her and Yotam have been doing a few tastings, but the process hasn't yet started in the test kitchen. So they'll come into the test kitchen, and then we'll test them kind of however many times, get Helen in for the approval, and then they get sent off to our blind taster. So and again, you never quite know what a book is going to be until you kind of start. So there's lots of ideas and kind of feelings around about the sort of book that you think it's going to be, and it's got a kind of working title, but it might be completely different. So again, like theatre, you don't quite know these different strands, and yet they don't really come together until halfway through, or sort of even more than that.
Yeah. Is the test kitchen in one of your, not an echo.
Is it in one of our houses, did you say?
In one of the restaurants, or is it in a free
no, it's not. It's separate to the restaurant. So chefs can come into the test kitchen from the restaurants if they want to work on a dish, but they tend to do that in the restaurants. They've got the space there. And we have kind of guest chef evenings where they come in and sort of show us something from the restaurants. But no, it's in Camden, and it's a very kind of unbling test kitchen. We sort of look in awe at the kind of Bon Appetit type kitchen, which is just totally amazing. And ours is very much designed as though we're kind of home cooks, because we don't want to have any fancy kit or equipment. But it's under a train arch, so we have these kind of trains rolling overhead, and yeah, in North London.
Where is Helen from? Was she born in London, or did she come from somewhere from a different country?
She her background is super interesting, and she's sort of Malaysian parents, and then raised in Australia for part of her life as well, and then came to London. So she's like Scully, Ramel Scully, who was Noppy. He also was in Australia, but had Malaysian background. So yeah, it'll be a treat in a store.
So here's another question from Josh. Israeli cuisine clearly adopted many elements from immigrants and surrounding cultures. Did you see any evidence of Palestinian cuisine adopting some of these cooking elements from elsewhere because of interactions with Israel?
Wow, massive question. I mean, no, my experience of the food that we were shown in Palestine was very traditionally Palestinian, but maybe that was because we were being cooked for in people's houses, so they were choosing to showcase their absolute kind of traditional recipes. And then we spoke to a lot of people who had cafes or restaurants in Palestine, and they were saying that it was actually very difficult for them to do experimental and different things and put them on their menu because their customers just didn't want it, largely, unless we were in Haifa, which is a bit sort of less traditional. So my answer, my own experience in answer to that would be no, but also Sami and I didn't really go down the kind of rabbit hole of who owns what, or who kind of, you know, who it belongs to, or even kind of where it started. And you know, that's talked a lot about in the book, but that wasn't really our kind of aim. Our aim was, you know, even kind of what makes food Palestinian. For us, it came down to certainly certain types of ingredients which are Palestinian, but for us, it all came down to people, and what made food Palestinian was the people who were cooking it and the place in which it was being cooked.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are you, Tara? Are you at all thinking about, or have you started to write any projects on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Falastin, like having my name on the cover of Falastin kind of makes, like, that kind of felt like a big moment for my own kind of hopes and dreams and kind of being seen. But then it was funny because it's something I've wanted for many years, having kind of written with Yotam. And then actually realize that actually it can be a lot more intimidating and nerve-wracking to actually write in your own name rather than kind of write with someone else and, you know, have kind of free reign of sort of anonymity. So yeah, I've got kind of various things going around my head. But maybe that's just the effect of lockdown or getting caught mad with the stories going around my head. I mean, the story, the thing I'd really love to fix, and the problem I'd love to solve for people in the kitchen is how to bring Ottolenghi food to the whole family, well, sort of kids included. I've got 12-year-old to twins and a little one, and the problem that I'd love to solve is how to cook just one meal in the evening rather than slightly cooking 2 meals. And I've been experimenting with it quite a lot in lockdown. And going through the backlist of Ottolenghi recipes and taking kind of one sauce and letting it go 3 ways, so that we can all kind of share the Ottolenghi sort of sauce. But whether I want some zog or some shatta or some dukkha on mine, but the kids want it a bit plainer, and just how we can all have it, because I know that kids don't like preserved lemon, or mine don't, or coriander, and yet I don't want to always kind of have to compromise. So that's the book that I would love to write, is how to crack that problem. So in the meantime, I need to just fix it for my own kids.
But I don't think you're the only person who has that issue. And I mean, I think that's like, yeah, and especially during lockdown when we're all everybody's cooking every meal and everybody's like stuck in the house together, and it's hard. And it's funny because it's not always about, like, you know, my son always ate everything. And so I was lucky. I never had to do anything separate. But now my husband has decided, for health reasons, and this is a good thing, that he doesn't want to eat, you know, that he shouldn't be eating white flour and white pasta and bread and, you know, sugar and all those things that he loves. So I'm finding, like, during, you know, for a lot of things that we make, and I prefer to eat healthy too, but I'm, you know, allowing myself not to be so dogmatic during this, you know, during the pandemic. But I often find that I'll do like brown rice for us and white rice for them, and, you know, like mixing.
And then you become a kind of short order chef, don't you? Kind of. But that's why I'm a real batch cooker, because I always have it in the fridge. It means that we can, you know, it can all just be ready to go. And I sort of let go of my dream of what I thought I'd be like as a mum a few years ago, and made me realize that as long as we're all actually sitting at the same table, it doesn't sort of slightly matter. The kids don't mind if you know, if we're all eating slightly different things. But it's certainly not the person that I sort of family I thought we'd, you know, sort of the way we'd eat. But and also I'm really interested in gluten-free and sugar-free. And again, that's the reason why I was attracted to Ottolenghi food in the first place, because a lot of it is naturally gluten-free but But again, that doesn't quite fit with the kind of Ottolenghi emphasis on abundance and inclusion. Like, you know, Yotam just doesn't, he's just not the man to kind of have a book that excludes whole food groups, because he's just all about abundance.
But I love that idea of sort of thinking about a book where you could like sort of focus on those kind of batch things, like even like pita bread or something. You could make it and freeze half of them, or, you know, those kind of things that you could sort of keep around and keep almost like as a grab and go thing, so that you could make meals out of different components. Like maybe you have a big day cooking on Saturday or something, but then your week is really easy because you've got all these cool things that you can.
Yeah, it's completely accurate. If anyone's on Instagram and wants to look, I've been doing it in the past kind of couple of months, and there's some things that have really worked well. You know, in Palestine, there's a you know, just a pita bread recipe. So you can make your pita bread, but then just get rid of half the batch, and then you can just roll it out for these little kind of, like they're called manakish, like little pizzas, and then that's just a whole great meal. And then just sort of tomatoes. There's a great tomato sauce in the Jerusalem book that has cod cakes in, that I just use in everything now. And so yeah, the kids are eating kind of Ottolenghi food almost without realizing it, just because they're putting the tomato sauce on their pizza base or with their meatballs and things. That's kind of, it's good. And actually, I'm loving lockdown, having the time to actually go through the backlist and kind of pull things together, because I think people have all these books on their shelves, but then aren't sort of making the connections between them.
That Tara, I'm going to quote you. I'm loving lockdown. You're going to be Tara. I'm loving lockdown. Wigley.
And I feel like it's really bringing our family together. You know, we're all just really bonding still a year in.
I'm glad
when they go back to school, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Instagram, because everybody should follow you on Instagram. And I think it's just at Tara Wigley, right? Or is there like okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we have just like 3 more minutes, and we want to keep to the schedule. Is there any other questions? Probably have time for one more question if anybody has anything for Tara. Now would be the moment. If not, I would just like to thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, everybody who joined us. Thank you very, very much, Tara, and congratulations on all this, you know, all your fabulous success. And you know, it's wonderful for you, but it's also wonderful for us, because these books are so great, and they just really, you know, they really contribute to quality of life in a like a very meaningful and tangible way for me, and I think for like grillions of other people as well. So I really want to thank you for being here. Getting some nice comments. This was really good. Everybody's saying thank you. So
thanks so much for reaching out. It's been really lovely to talk, and thanks for reading all the books, because spend all this time writing the words, and then I sometimes think everyone doesn't even read them. So that's, it's very nice.
And the other thing about the books is, and you and I talked about this the other day, the recipes really work. They're tested over and over and over again. And unlike many, many, many cookbooks, these recipes really, really work. They're written, they're like meticulous, and they're great. And yet they allow you room to play. So it's just great. So Julie's saying, we do read them. We love reading your books. So
if I lie in bed reading cookery books in bed, my husband thinks I'm mad, but I totally take them to bed to read. Brilliant.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you again, Tara. Everybody, you know, you can let people know if they've missed this, that we will have a link available. So this has been recorded, so people can see it later. So Josh A is saying hummus fata. Okay, so thank you again, and thank you everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thanks so much, Leslie. Take care, everyone.
You too. Bye.